Okay, now we're going to talk about sexual harassment, and I usually start this part of the course by asking for one of the really macho young men in the class to work with me on a hypothetical. And I tell this man, you have come to work for my company, and you've been working at my company for a few years, working on the assembly line. And one day at work, I call you aside and I say, well, first of all, for this hypothetical, we're going to assume that I am gay, which I am not. And not to say there's anything wrong with that, as Seinfeld would say. But for this hypothetical, assume that I'm the gay boss, okay? So I call this young man aside and I say, you know, George, I've been watching your performance at the work here, and you've always done really good work. And I just wanted to thank you for that. And you know, I'm not sure whether you're aware of this or not, but Frank, who is the line foreman, he's getting ready to retire. And I'm going to have to find somebody to promote up to his job and have a new line foreman. It's more status, prestige, and a lot higher pay. And I'm considering I'm considering promoting you, Frank, to line foreman. But I'm not sure yet. You know, the other thing that I've noticed, though, is I've noticed that you have those magnificent broad shoulders and that manly chin and that beautiful, shiny, dark hair. And I'll tell you what, George, why don't you come over to my house for dinner tonight? And we'll light some candles and open a bottle of wine, and we'll get out some massage oil, and we'll discuss the possibility of your getting the promotion. Well, by that point, I usually have the young man squirming in his seat. Sometimes the whole class is laughing, and sometimes, it's really, really awkward, which is great. It's exactly what I was looking for, because there's a couple of reasons why I pick a young man to do that hypothetical with rather than a young woman. Actually, there's three reasons. The first reason is I frankly would be terrified of losing my job if I was playing games like that with a woman. But the second one is I want every young man in the class, I'm hoping that they stop for a moment and think about how awful and awkward and potentially degrading and humiliating it would feel to go through an experience like that in real life with a boss. And the third reason is because when you teach a course on sexual harassment in the workplace, almost every semester I've ever done this in a classroom with 30 or 40 people, there are several women in the room who have already experienced sexual harassment, and sometimes they tell you about it and sometimes they don't, but they don't have to tell you about it, because when we get to this portion of the course, you can see this sick look on their faces, and you can actually look out there and you can pick out which ones. And it's, as a man, that is a really humbling and somewhat frustrating experience. So I don't ask the women to be a part of this. But when the sexual harassment is done by an employer, by either the owner of the business or a supervisor or a manager or anyone who has some rank upon the employee, and they're saying, well, you do a little something for me, in exchange for that I'll do a little something for you, that is called the quid pro quo form of sexual harassment, and it is generally regarded as the worst kind of sexual harassment because business owners, managers, and supervisors are supposed to be trained to know better than that. And if they do that, then it's pretty blatant wrongdoing, and if you get caught and sued for that, get out your checkbook, because you're probably going to have to pay this person a lot of money. So that's quid pro quo sexual harassment. It's by supervisors or business owners. The Supreme Court did say, though, in order to win those cases, usually there has to be some tangible form of employment action. Somebody did get a promotion or somebody did not get a promotion. Somebody who refused the sexual advances got shipped off to be the fish inspector on the dock where it's 40 degrees below zero in Fairbanks, Alaska. Something like that happened. But the court also said you can have some degree of protection against this if you have training programs in place at your workplace that teach that sexual harassment will not be tolerated in the workplace, and if you have an employee policy manual that says sexual harassment will not be tolerated in the workplace, and you have a designated reporting person. If you do experience sexual harassment at this place of work, you report it to so-and-so, and they will report it up the chain of command, and they will initiate an investigation and take corrective action. Now, one other note about that: if you own a business, don't you dare ever receive a report of sexual harassment and try to sweep it under the rug without doing a sufficient investigation and without taking some form of corrective action. Because if it comes out in the lawsuit for harassment that they did report the incident, and you swept it under the rug, you didn't make an investigation, or you didn't take corrective action, look out, get your checkbook out, because you're really going to have to pay. Large companies are so afraid that they may be accused of not doing an adequate investigation that nowadays many of them hire an independent outside agency to do the investigation and recommend the corrective action, so they can't be accused of not doing an adequate investigation. This is not all as simple and black and white and good versus evil as it looks like in the movies, though. I do another hypothetical with the class that we can't really do here, but I say, suppose that you work for my company, and there's a guy by the name of Joe who is our star salesperson, and he's responsible for 80% of the sales for our company. 80% of all of our profits come from Joe's sales. But the problem is the same high testosterone levels in Joe that make him a great aggressive salesperson also make him a jerk with women. And so you're one of the women that works at the front desk, and every time Joe comes in the office, he makes lewd and suggestive comments and advances to you, and so finally you report him. Now, the thing about Joe is our competitors know he's the one that makes all our money, and they would like to hire him away from us. They make him offers every day. Somehow he stays with us. But if I have to discipline him for sexual harassment, we may lose him. And if we lose him, we lose 80% of all of our sales. We might bankrupt the company. All the employees might lose their job. So I come to you and I say, look, I feel terrible about what happened to you with Joe. But, you know, Joe's 80% of our profits. If we lose Joe, we may end up going broke and everyone will lose their job. I know that you've always been a great team player. How about instead of me disciplining Joe, I do this? How about I give you a promotion and I move you to the back room where you will never have to see Joe again, and I give you a little pay raise, and we forget about this whole thing. Well, when I propose that to women, I get 2 or 3 different answers. Some of them grin back at me and say, well, how big a pay raise are we talking about? Some of them shrug and say, I guess that'd be okay. And some of them say, no, it's absolutely not okay, because if I let Joe get away with what he did to me, he's going to go ahead and do it to other women, and that's just not okay with me, and it needs to be fixed. I can't tell you what's the right answer for you if that situation ever happens to you. It depends upon the circumstances, and it depends upon you. But now you have a chance to think about it ahead of time, because this is the kind of thing that happens in the real world. The decisions that we make, even the moral decisions, are not always simple black and white, good versus evil, as they show up in the movies. Sometimes it's muddy and gray and sticky and confusing, and sometimes we have to compromise and we don't get the result that we would like to see.